Hello everyone, welcome back to our second learning series for our project The House. In part 4, we will learn how to export our textures from Quixel Mixer and import them inside Blender to assign it to our project. And finally, how to export the whole model with the textures to Unreal Engine and set up a preliminary lighting setup to preview the model inside Unreal Engine. So let's get started. So to start, if you remember from our previous video, we have learned how to import the model inside Quixel Mixer and how to start setting our layer setup based on our material that have separated our object. Let's say, for example, for this part into 3 different parts. The texture, for example, that we have used here was composed of different layers. So if we select this texture, for example, basically just a few of the Stacko maps that are available on the online package inside Quixel Mixer. And then finally we started to add a bit of a details. Let's say, for example, if we look at the reference here, we can see that there is a bit of small freckles around the wall. So we've added an old texture wall where we started to add also a paint mask on top of that layer to extract, for example, these small details by painting on the wall. So if I'm, for example, painting right now, I'm eliminating that texture and I can choose which part of it I can show to enhance and add more details to our wall. Also for the floor, we have added a few extra details by adding an imperfections layer that you can find also in the online layer or in your site inside your local library by going to the imperfection. So I have added just a couple of them to give us an idea of this wood floor, a bit of stain and scratch it on top of it. Then for the last part, for the dark wall, as we have seen in our reference images, especially where we see the sun hitting that wall, I believe in one of these images, this one. So let's enhance this a little bit, double click. So you can see that there's a bit of a scratch and also a bit of dirt that have accumulated, maybe because of the sun on top of that material, or maybe also as a nature of that specific material. So all I did is just added a rough concrete and darkened the color, and I added then a smooth concrete with a paint mask, and again started also to paint on top of that to determine which part I want to show these details by using also some of the paint brushes that are also available inside Quixel Mixer. Specifically for this one, it's called Paintbrush Decay. So it's really a useful brush where we can use it to add, for example, let's press X and delete what we have here just to show you how this brush is performing. Let's move the lighting a little bit here so we can see. So if we press X again, let's say we want to add a bit of details on top of this part. So this will act as a second layer on top of our texture. And the same technique have been applied to the other parts that we have imported after we have divided our model inside Blender. And adding the fact that we also try to extend and increase our pixel density as much as possible. And then the export part came after that. So when we decided to export our textures from Quixel to use it inside Blender, the first thing we need to keep in mind, this is really important. To export your textures, you have to activate all of your layer setup textures and even those inside textures with the eye visibility icon. So they all have to be enabled, otherwise you will receive after the export an empty texture element. Let's say, for example, the albedo, for example. Inside the export, we have chosen specific textures that we want to export, we have excluded the displacement and the glossiness, as the roughness and the metalness actually will act enough in this part. So for our texture set, we have our 3 different parts. It is also really important to point out that the export process consumes a lot of your memory, so that's also important to keep in mind when you export, especially as we have done. We have exported 8K texture. We have saved our file before exporting, and sometimes if you get your Quixel mixer to crash during the export process, it is recommended to disable part of these textures while you export. Define, for example, just some of them, unless if the process works fine, then you don't need to disable or do it on a sequence. You can do it all together. Finally, you can edit your texture extension as we have done here. We have chosen JPEG format. The reason behind this, PNG and TIF is a great extension with lots of detail inside the image, but with the amount of textures that we are exporting for this specific part of the project, we decided to go with the JPEG because it's gonna reduce the size of the texture. That's being said, after that we have defined our destination where we wanna export our textures, and then hit export to our disk after defining that we need to export an 8K textures. Finally, before we move to Blender, if you remember inside Blender, when we added the materials, specifically for example for the white walls and the dark walls, you'll find if you use the same materials that you have used, for example, for that part that we have imported inside Quixel Mixer. So to make this more clear, let's close all the layers that we have. So for example, the ground floor that we have used are composed of 3 different parts: dark, the floor, and the white wall. Then when we choose to export the first floor, which contain also a white wall, it is really important to name this material, which is the same material, into a different name. The reason behind this, Quixel Mixer will export your material that you have added to that project with the same name that have been exported to this wall, which will create an unnecessary process of renaming these materials, then adding them inside Blender. So basically it is really easy to name these material inside Blender, let's say for example number 2 or number 3, before exporting to Quixel Mixer. So I'm gonna hit export and pause the video and come back after that. So back to Blender, where we're showing only the first part of our 3D model that we have exported the texture from Quixel Mixer, and once the export will be finished, you will see a pop-up window with all the textures that have been exported. So to start, we're gonna go to the shading, and immediately you will see that each object from these 3 elements have a different material setup inside this node panel. So to add the textures, you can easily drag your textures inside this node panel. So I'm gonna drag the albedo, the normal, and also the roughness, metalness, and finally the ambient occlusion. So let's connect these to know which is what. So we'll start by the albedo by connecting the color to the base color, and immediately we'll see that the texture have shown up on our 3D object, but it is as flat as the color that have been assigned to it. So to add the details of the normal, we need to connect the normal texture to the normal channel, but still we cannot see any details. That's because we need to add another node in between called normal map that will add a transition between the texture and the normal channel. Again, we also need to change the color space from the sRGB to the non-color. And now we can increase our strength, for example, to 1.2. And let's zoom in a little bit, and we can start to see that normal start to pop up on the 3D model. So the more you will add to the strength, the more obviously you'll see from that normal channel. Next, we will add also roughness to the roughness channel, and also the metalness. So now we have all our textures added to the model, but as you can see, it needs a little bit of a tweaking to reduce the look inside our texture preview. One important note to add here: when we export our model with the texture added to Unreal Engine, a problem that we will face is that these nodes will not be translated inside Unreal Engine to its actual or to its necessary node that will give us the same result. So instead of adding these nodes and then deleting them later on, we'll just keep the textures connected to the texture channel and then we will export it. But before that, we just want to know what exactly the ambient channel is doing to the object here. Sorry about that. The ambient occlusion adds as an extra details to our texture setup. Let's look at an example of how the actually ambient occlusion react to the 3D model with the texture. And let's connect the albedo with the ambient occlusion to our texture channel so we can see, based on our example here, the result. We'll start by adding a node called math, which will combine both together. Let's add it between so it can interact between the albedo and then connect the second channel, which is the ambient occlusion. Then we're gonna add another node which is called color ramp, which will help us to control the strength of that ambient occlusion into our map. The areas that have not been exposed to the light, which shows obviously as a darker area, we can increase and decrease the amount of that based on that node. So it's basically one of the important element of your texture that will add details to your project. But for now, let's just keep this later on, because this specific ambient occlusion texture will be handy later on. For now, let's add other textures for the floor, for example. So I'm gonna select the floor, and again the same way we did with the white wall, let's connect the albedo. Again, let's connect the normal, add a normal map between them, and hit let's say for example 1.3. Let's connect the metalness and also the roughness. So again, we'll start to see more details for the floor after connecting all of the textures. So let's add also the dark wall. So let's drag the albedo, normal, metalness and roughness. Again, connecting them all the same way we did. Now we'll see a bit of a lag or slow performance because of the texture size. Let's convert this to non-color and to the normal. Let's add normal map. Again, let's increase the strength a little bit. Connect the roughness and also the metalness. Alright, so now we have also our wall connected, all the textures are ready, and now we're gonna continue with the rest of the model and prepare it to send it to Unreal Engine. So I'm gonna pause the video and continue texturing the whole model and then come back once it's finished. So now that we have finished texturing our whole model with the textures, we are now ready to send the model to Unreal Engine. To do that, we have different ways actually to send our model from Blender to Unreal Engine. There's the send to Unreal add-on, and there's the FBX format, and also there's the GLFT to exporter and importer, which is really also impressive. But they all share one characteristics, is that they will send the model to our asset browser, which means we have to move our 3D model into our scene manually or by typing its location from Blender to Unreal Engine. So the best way to send our ArcViz model is by using a datasmith add-on, which will help us actually send the model with the texture and also assign it or allocate it inside our 3D scene with its related location inside Blender. So to install the Datasmith add-on, we will add the link in the description. You simply just press on install and choose the zip file and it will immediately install. Next, we're gonna head to export and choose Datasmith. Now, when you choose to export your Datasmith files, you will add selected object only. That in case you wanna export it part by part. We don't need actually to export the animations, and you can either activate the use sRGB gamma correction, but anyway we will add, or we can correct this inside Unreal Engine. So we're gonna export it now and create an Unreal Engine new file and start importing the model inside of it. So we will create an architectural project with a blank, and then we're gonna disable also the ray trace because we're gonna enable it later on. At this stage we just need no starter content, just an empty file, and then we will name our project part 2. Once our Unreal Engine file has been opened, we're just gonna go to the file, hit new level, and then just start with an empty level so we can add our model with the lighting later on. So if your Datasmith add-on is not available in your toolbar, simply just go to the plugin and type in Datasmith and start enabling the add-on by enabling it inside your Unreal Engine plugin. So once we import the file, we basically have a few options that we need to activate and deactivate. So we don't need any lights, cameras or animations. We definitely need the material and the textures. And for the light map resolution, because we're gonna do an ArcViz project, we need to bump this up to 512 and to 1024. And later on, maybe we'll need actually to increase this. Now the next part is generate light map UVs. Now we actually created our light map inside, or we unwrapped actually our project, our model inside Blender, and we created different UV textures carefully as an 8K textures, so we don't need actually to generate anything inside Unreal Engine at this moment. So we're gonna import the model. So once we import our model inside the Unreal Engine, we'll first notice that it's in gray color mode, which is the material is not actually activated. And to solve that, we'll simply go to the materials, and the first thing we'll notice that we'll see all of these materials as instance of a master material. This process is part of the Datasmith algorithm. It actually creates a parent material with its instance material. So to solve first the issue of this invisible material, we'll choose for example one of the parent material, and then go to the normal map, double click it, go to the sRGB and disable it, and then save. And then we need to apply this. If you don't see the apply button, just move one of these nodes and then apply, continue. Then we'll start to see all of our materials except for the inside wall, which is the other parent material. We're gonna solve it the same way we did, and then just move one of the node, apply, continue. Alright, so now our material are all visible. Let's just drag one of the lights node, the HDRI backdrop. By the way, we're using Unreal Engine 4.26 because we want to actually explore some of its new features. Okay. Now we need to adjust these materials to look much better as we have seen them inside Blender. To do that, we need to adjust the parent material. First, let's give a space to all the textures, and let's delete all of this color range nodes that was created by the Datasmith. We'll replace them with a slider using a scalar parameter. Hit S, left click, name this to metalness, And let's connect this to multiply, connect the A, and then connect it to the metallic. Let's put the default value, for example, to 1, start from point 1 and end, for example, by 20, just to give more control over the slider. We'll duplicate this by hitting Ctrl W and name this as roughness. Again, connect this to the roughness bar. Now as for the normal, we need to activate it through another node called flatten normal, which will enable us to control it using also another scalar parameter. Let's call it normal power. And let's connect this also. At this moment, we can simply apply and then choose one of these materials, for example. So I guess if we go to the white wall, which is this one, all what we need to do is activate these scalar parameters that we have created, and let's increase the normal and also the roughness a little bit. You can see from here, yeah. So if we increase the roughness, we'll start to lose some of these reflections on top of the wall, and also if we increase the metalness with a lower value of the roughness. So let's count something in the middle like this, for example. The next thing we can also do inside Unreal Engine is by enabling the resolution of these textures. We can do that by hitting on these textures and going to the level of details and choosing no map, and also go to the compression. We will also maximize the texture size to 8192, which is the same resolution texture that we have exported from Blender. We have to do this to all the textures so we can get the best resolution out of it. So let's do this also. And this is the dark wall of the ground floor. Activated normal power, also activated with the roughness and the metalness, until you start to see these details coming up. I guess if we increase the normal more or minimize it as much as possible. We can also disable this flare effect by going to the project settings, so we can have a better look of this material. We can do more editing on these textures later on in our upcoming videos, so let's just work in this floor also. Same thing, and this is the useful part of the parent material. If you wish to use each material as a separate material, as a parent, all what you need to do is save the same parent material, let's say for example as a wood material, and then change the textures through the slider that is available here. For now, let's take use of this scalar parameter, and it seems like it's not affecting this material. I guess maybe this is the other one. We can find that by clicking on the object, hitting this browser button. It's floor 001. So sorry about that, I was editing the other texture. So again, let's increase the normal and the roughness a little bit and save. So if we hit G just to go into game mode, you can see now that we have a better look of that texture. So we don't want to put a lot of time now in the editing of these textures, because we're going to do that in our upcoming videos after we finish importing all of the other remaining objects. But for now, we can add also a direct light from our places actor. So we're going to place a directional light, adjust its direction, for example, at this level. And now we're going to hit the baking, the lighting baking button, where we're gonna assign it as a production. Keep in mind, at this stage we are using the CPU light bake process. For the GPU, we're gonna do that also in our upcoming videos. For now, we can just hit build to preview the quality of the process so far. So now, after the lighting bake have finished, we're just reviewing a basic idea of these materials with lighting. Nothing fancy here. We're just gonna continue working on this in our upcoming videos. So let's just keep in mind, for example, if you have something like that, because we're using a single face material or a single face object, just double click the material, and then again for the parent material, just activate the two-sided, apply, and your materials will enable the two-sided face, so we don't need to worry about adding a second face or anything. So at this stage we managed to export our textures, add them inside Blender, and also export them to Unreal Engine. So in our upcoming videos we're gonna continue working on our model, and if you have any questions regarding this video content, please share it down in the comment, and thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video.